Hey witches, it's Lee and this is Do the Magical Thing, and I thought we'd have a little chat about witchsplaining. Perhaps a controversial one, but hopefully we'll get through it. So we've looked at witchcraft, we looked at magic in terms of how we can picture ourselves in it and conceptualise it. We've looked at gathering and arranging and casting spells. And once you've done that a few times, what do you want to do next? Well, you might look for some new ideas and fresh perspectives. And so you pop into the old witchy community, and that's really most accessible online. And as we know from our interactions on social media, it can be a help and a hindrance. It can be a help in that you'll find some fantastic witches who will blow your mind, change your practice, and just you'll develop so much more and so much more brilliantly through this interaction. And obviously you can have that pre-internet through books and coven meets, but right now obviously it's a bit of a challenge in terms of meeting. At least you can still get books, but now on the internet obviously we have the whole author accessibility thing, which is amazing. You get to speak and interact with these fantastic fonts of knowledge. Happy days, right? The hindrance comes from what I call Broomers. Now, Broomers are essentially the witchcraft version of boomers, and I coined the phrase from that whole boomer trend, but I'm going to say that it's not about a generation, it's not about a age. I know that the whole sort of boomer generation is a thing, but I think we've kind of accepted that the whole OK Boomer thing is really a conversation about mindset, about an inflexibility. And I made a little meme. It had Nancy from The Craft, and she's looking to one side disdainfully, as she often does. Above her, the text reads, when someone tries to witchsplain to you in the comment section or thereabouts. And to her side, it has the phrase, as if she's saying it, or at least thinking it, OK Broomer. Now, what is that kind of boomer or broomer mindset? It's often someone who speaks from their privilege but doesn't acknowledge the fact they have that privilege. They often believe that society is a meritocracy, that you just have to work hard enough and you'll get to the top, and that ignores societal injustices and barriers that are in place for certain people. Now, it also tends to be someone who projects their worldview onto others and their morality onto others. It's someone who benefits and fits into the overculture. Now, what is an overculture? Essentially, it's a dominant set of values, belief, and morals, that kind of thing, that's applied really to a broad spectrum of people. In the Western world, we can see this as Christianity. We can see this through the fact that there's an expectation or an assumption of belief in a god and the fact that it's the god. There's also religious festivals, and there are public holidays centred around those religious festivals, assuming you're going to celebrate them. And there's phrases that are inherently Christian, like, oh my god, what the hell? These have real Christian undertones to them, or blatant Christian themes to them. Now, do we have an overculture in witchcraft? Well, I believe we do, through the popularisation of Wicca, the religious system of belief, and through it being kind of presented as the acceptable form of witchcraft through its morality. Not only that, there have been publications that have conflated the term witch and Wiccan to be the same thing when we know they're not. They're two separate things, and you certainly don't have to be Wiccan to be a witch. Now, I think it's important to note that there is traditional Wicca and there is the more neo-Wicca. And I think it's really neo-Wicca that is not at fault necessarily, but is certainly the main purveyor of these sort of myths. Now, these myths, similarly to Christianity, assume a belief in deities, a god and a goddess. They assume that you follow the wheel of the year, religious festivals, and they assume that you use certain terms like blessed be. Now, these things are often taken out of their original context and applied vastly to the whole breadth of witchcraft. And these things are certain morals like, and it harm none, or to harm none with your witchcraft. There's also the concept of the threefold law, the idea of things coming back to you in 3 times whatever you put out. And this is applied to people who are requesting certain magics and certain spells. And this is where it gets to be frustrating, because when we're looking and seeking for information, what we don't want is someone's morality put onto us and the assumptions of belief systems put onto us. Because if someone wants a hex or a curse, then they're fully entitled to ask for that without getting shamed for it. And there is such a thing as hex shaming and spell shaming in general. Now, we forget that witchcraft is really a tool of the oppressed. It's a tool of people who have been made powerless by society and can have to scrap and affect change through any way they possibly can. You know, we often have these systematic inequalities in place that hold us down, hold us back, and sometimes justice is really hard to come by for people. And so if people are seeking hexes, if people are seeking curses, then why not? The reality is, we know witchcraft is something that, if we analyse it enough, is essentially a placebo effect, something that makes us feel better through doing it. Even if we know about it, there's the open placebo effect that said Naru mentions on her channel. And this is something that, even if we know this is something that theoretically from science-based perspective has no actual benefit, it still makes us feel good. It still makes us feel like we have some sense of control, some sense of doing something. And so if it is something that affects change, you know, I've affected change through magic. I know that. I've experienced it. It's just a fact for me. But even if you are sceptical, at the very least, a hex or a curse of any kind is something that is cathartic. Now, does it mean that we shouldn't be thinking about these things before we do them? Well, of course, we should be thinking about any working before we cast it. We should think about it thoroughly, do proper cleansing and centering and grounding, all of those things. Now, are there alternatives? Yes. But I think it's a bit patronising to assume that people who are asking for hexes and spells, such as curses, haven't thought about that first. It's a bit patronising to think they haven't thought of the mundane things first. With the hex shaming and with the sort of curse shaming, I think that really we need to remember how much is done through concentrating our power towards fixing injustices. And look at the political landscape that we are in, and look at the amount of witches who mobilised to really seek justice for people, for various different people from different minorities, people who are, you know, fighting against fascism and other things like that. These are really key things, and that joint energy, that joint effort, it's worth something. It's worth all those kind of crazy headlines about us witches. You know, we get so many of those, don't we? We get so many clickbait headlines. But when you find this collection of people working towards something, that's via hex work, that's via curse work, how can that be a bad thing, that it's mobilised so many people to fight for the benefit of others? This is the ironic thing. You know, spell works don't have to be positive vibes only, yeah? Positive vibes only means that you don't address the shadow in yourself. You don't address those parts of you that are going to end up leaking out in a really toxic way in the future. And I think the challenge is that there is no monolithic belief in witchcraft, you know? As much as there can be ones that are portrayed as it, there isn't. And this is a really tough lesson to learn when you're first coming into witchcraft, because you're like, oh gosh, there's so much to try and narrow down. But that's also the joy of witchcraft. You know, from a personal perspective, in terms of all of this idea of morality and of Broomers, I've experienced it through being a non-theist witch, you know, someone who doesn't believe in deities, who, yeah, I dig the supernatural. I dig some unexplainable things. I've made some unexplainable things happen. But I feel that a lot of my practice, there was struggle to get to where I am now because of this assumption of belief in deities, especially this binary of male and female, even if they are representations of a whole one. I just think, why divide it? I think it's important to note, you know, there's hope. There's always hope. I'm a hopeless romantic. I struggled for a time, but I did find my witchy community. I did find that atheist and non-theist sort of folks out there, and people who were not in that kind of binary as well. And I think that, you know, it's been some years now, and I think that it's just gone from strength to strength, and I've made some fantastic friends. And the good thing is about that kind of small pond is you meet some big fish, you know, you meet some fantastic people. And, you know, one of those is Alex Rec. I always link their shop in my description box. They didn't ask me to do that, but it's just something I appreciate because I like their perspectives on things. And they really stock a mindful, non-Wiccan catalogue of books and zines, and they've written two themselves, which are really, really worth checking out. Check out the Instagram page, actually, because I did a review, or rather an unwrapping of these as well. Now, Grove Daughter Witchery by Brina Gowan is a book I've mentioned before, and this is also it's really a blueprint, a kind of schematic for witches, especially secular atheists and non-theists witches, because it doesn't presume all those things that other books tend to presume about practice. They say Develop your own set of beliefs, your own set of practices. Understand and accept that these can and will change as you continue to learn. Now, that's just, perfect, isn't it? So, when you're out in the witchy sphere, there are going to be people who are projecting onto you their ideas, their opinions, their morals and their worldview. You know, there's going to be that unsolicited advice. And that's why kind of shielding, that energetic shielding, is so worthwhile doing, not just for your magical practice and spell work, but for these interactions with people. In the future, I'm going to talk about shielding, how we can adapt certain wording for it. One final note before our magical thing to do. The meme that I mentioned has been shared, and my page has been cut off. I've re-tagged it a few more times in the actual picture, but if you do see it untagged and not credited, please tag the page. I know that it's just a meme. I know that I shouldn't be that bothered by it, but the reality is, as my friend the Geordie Witch said of Secrets of the Cauldron, it's all labour, and people should be credited for their labour. With our magical thing to do, we've spoken a lot about other people and what they're up to and what they're doing. We're going to look at ourselves and our behaviour and how that will, how we can do certain things that will help and benefit us in the witchy online community. We've done the magical theory, let's do the magical thing. Okay, witches, here's our magical thing to do. We've looked at other people's bad habits, but what about our own bad habits? How can we not crash on the witching web? Well, why is this important? The reality is we spend a lot of our time in online spaces, and for some of us, that's our only witching source of community and advice. And so we want this space to be both healthy and helpful. Now, over the years, I've noticed some patterns of behaviour and different things that we probably need to refresh ourselves on or avoid, really to make sure this is the case. And I think that, with the web, we get pop-ups. So I thought I'd go with a similar kind of vein. And I've gone for a bit of a lift the flaps kind of thing here. Insert your own jokes. Okay, so door number 1, and it is a door, quite literally, is be a good guest. Now, this seems pretty self-explanatory, doesn't it? And I wish it was. But the reality is some people will come into groups, they don't read the room, and they end up really not bringing anything to the party, like our little friend has actually brought something to contribute here. And what you want to do is consider the vibe, consider the space that you're in. Is it a jokey space? Is it a more academic space? Learn sort of how to integrate yourself into the group so you get the most out of it. How do we do that? Well, we start off by making sure we've read the rules and guidelines and continue to read them, refresh ourselves on them. This will help us understand our place in the community and also other people's. And so we can address things that aren't helpful and aren't healthy in the community. Another way of making sure that we are getting the most out of things, and by not only reading the guidelines and helping ourselves in that respect, is by using group search. Now, on Facebook groups, you can use this group search at the top of the groups there, and I'm sure you can do it in many other communities, or you can just scroll, make the effort to scroll down. And this will help you, and it will especially help older existing members of the group not repeat themselves endlessly, because I guarantee you, for whatever recommendation you're after, there's been something that has been requested in the past. And if there hasn't, once you've done this searching, then you can post something yourself. Now, you could also post something off the back of an existing post. You go, what, I saw this idea, or I want to expand on this part of this conversation, or whatever it is. I think this is really key, just because it will really show that you've made the effort to have a look at the existing things that have gone on, and as I say, really help you to make sure you are contributing. Now, we've done this, we've had a little look around, we've seen what's gone on, and so we're excited about these people. We've read their ideas, we've looked at different things, and the reality is they're not going to be our friends overnight. The reality is when we enter online spaces, especially witchy spaces, we often think, yay, witches, that means they're going to be our friends. And actually, we're all just a bunch of strangers on the internet. Now, you will grow friendships, but it will take time. Give it time. Don't go in expecting people to be family. Give it time, and the more you put in, the more you'll get out. You'll have some fantastic people in your life, but when you come in saying things like, hey, brothers and sisters, and all this kind of stuff, it may seem like sort of harmless and really kind of being friendly and all that sort of thing, but it actually is a little bit disrespectful to the bonds of brother and sisterhood, if you're into that, or the bonds of family, if we're going to make it less gendered. and whether that's chosen family or your family you were born into, you know, those titles are really earned, you know, through experience, through familial ties, all that kind of thing. And talking of gendering, let's avoid those terms altogether if we can, because something like that it's just unhelpful. You know, there are lots of different folks out there. We want to make sure our witchcraft is as inclusive as possible. And so use terms like folks, use terms like witches, yeah, hey witches, hey folks, whatever that is. Far, you know, more helpful, I think, and more inclusive. Now, what we don't want to do, and what I see far too often, is spell begging. Yeah, don't come into a group and just ask for spells again and again and again and again. Don't ask for energy all the time. Don't ask for people to put their effort into whatever thing it is you need sorted out now, because unless, and here's the thing, unless you're going to do some of the work yourself, yeah? Because it's one thing to ask for help with ideas for casting your own spell, but too often people ask other people to cast something for them, or they will want to have all the information with none of the effort. It's kind of a whole feed me sort of thing, rather than feeding yourself and then wanting to find out new ingredients to enhance the flavour. Yeah, a lot of people put a lot of effort and labour into their work, into their spellcraft, and if you've got this sort of gimme attitude, it is not going to endear you, and people won't want to help you. You know, as I say, do some kind of discussion. Have a look at those discussions, like we said, and contribute something. Say, look, I want to do a prosperity spell. I found this out, but what else could I add in? You know, bring something to the party, as I say. Now, another thing to do, or rather not do, is not make it all about you. This kind of moves on from here, but realistically, groups are diverse places. Not everything is going to be to your liking, and you can scroll on by, yeah? That's absolutely fine to scroll on by. And I think it's really important that we make sure that we're really allowing room for discussion, and we're allowing ourselves to not always be at the centre of things. You know, we don't want to project our morals onto other people. That's where we get into that spell shaming thing, which we don't want. Yeah, we don't want all that stuff. We are not spamming our stuff endlessly. Now, you know, in terms of this gimme culture sort of thing, and in terms of spell begging and using other people's energy, credit where credit's due is important here. Yeah, credit where credit's due, but equally, don't spam things in groups. Yeah, have some posts that are not about you. Have some posts that are not about something you're trying to sell or promote or whatever it is, and also promote other people's, you know, posts, like their stuff, comment on their stuff. You know, all that kind of thing is really kind of helpful, or is helpful, to make it not so much about you and to make it about community if we're really seeking to do that. Now, onwards from this sort of idea of community and that being important, is making sure that we support our witchy friends actively, yeah? That means sharing their stuff where we can. And this prevents this sort of excessive spam kind of thing going on, yeah? Because if you're supporting your friends in various places, they're not going to feel the need to constantly do that themselves. But also, it's about making sure that when people are asking for book recommendations, you're suggesting your friend's store, you're suggesting someone for a planner, yeah, that you particularly like. This is why I have those links in my description box, because they're witches that I know and that I have, you know, a great deal of time for, and I want to support them. You know, if you're saying to somebody, oh yeah, I really like this, you know, don't just like it, share it, yeah? Do whatever it is you can to help out your witchy friends, especially those grassroots witches who are not part of big publishing houses and all that kind of thing. So often those big publishers will have a fantastic team in terms of media and social media especially, but little individual witches who have their projects, their things that they're working on, and they're like, hey, I did this thing, like, help me out here. You know, those are the folks we really need to be promoting, because they're not the guys who are going to have that big team behind them constantly flashing ads all over the shop, yeah? So support your witchy friends. And not only that, it doesn't have to be about just their projects, just their whatever. It can be through spell work. You know, if your friend's going through a tough time, help them out with a boost of energy, a boost of some kind of spell. And I say friends because these are not folks who are spell begging. You know, these are not folks who are little sprouts. They're people who are those strong, healthy, you know, parts of our forest, if you like, our grove, that really we want to make sure we're supporting, because then that benefits all of us. Now, I say, benefit and balance and all that kind of thing. This is going to be one of those key things that's slightly, off to one side. And forgive my spelling. We really want to be balancing online with offline practice. Now, this comes into play here somewhat, doesn't it? Because if we're supporting our witchy friends in terms of energy, we're probably doing that in our offline space. Maybe we've got a working that we have put aside for them to do. But we want to make sure we're balancing online with offline practice, because the thing is, you can talk a lot about it, you can do all sorts of things like that, but you really want to be making sure that you are spending time doing magical thing. Now, this also means doing your research, yeah? Doing research that's offline, in books and things like that if you can. Doing research of your local area, all that kind of thing, yeah? There is an offline space there. Building community in your, in your own sort of town, in your own village, in your own city, whatever it is. There is offline practice you can do which will help your spellcraft. And so I really think it's worth having that balance just to even things out a little bit and help yourself to grow more effectively and more robustly. We talk about that grove of friends that we want to have, and we all need to be strong in our practice to make sure we can be able to support that. And I think that realistically all of these things are about making sure our personal practice is robust and something that we are sure of regardless of what community we are or aren't a part of. And it's something that we are able to really make sure that we can make sustainable. So those are our little ideas of things that will help us not to crash on the witching web. And I hope they helped you out. I hope they gave you something to think about. And yeah, I think all these things are just really something that will, just aid you to have a bit more of an experience online that's helpful, and that you'll get something out of, and you'll feel like you're contributing to something. That's good, isn't it? And till next time, health and wealth. Blah 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 blah.